Welcome back to FTFM. I'm joined by Helena Morrissey, Chief Executive of Newton Investment Management. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
You have recently launched an initiative to get more women onto corporate boards. Will this be effective in and of itself, do you think, without any legislation to back it up?
Well, my hope is that we'll get there without a quota stipulating how many women or what percentage of women should be on boards. I think there's a lot of momentum around this issue at the moment, and I think a lot of us would like to see a big leap in the proportion of women on boards and in senior levels generally without resorting to a quota.
And you're aiming for 30% in 5 years. Where are we at the moment?
12.5% if you look at the FTSE, the top 100 companies, and I'm afraid the numbers dwindle somewhat if you look at the next 250 companies by size. The Cranfield report, which recently came out, has got a lot of statistics, and we haven't moved very much at all in the last 5 years, really.
And before that, was there a gradual increase, or have we?
It's been a bit leaps and bounds, but definitely a sense of plateauing. And obviously, 10% or 12% isn't very much where we're at. So it hasn't been as if we've really leapt, and we certainly haven't fallen back. But it's been just a very glacial pace over the last decade, really.
And what's seen as the main problems that are stopping women get onto boards?
Well, I think there's more than one. That's part of the problem, and a lot of time and energy is spent trying to diagnose what is it that's really an impediment to further penetration. I think one of the big reasons that we can never get around, of course, is the fact that women often take a career break if they do have children. But I think many of us, and particularly the chairman who've signed up to the 30% initiative, recognise that at that point people might, or when they come back to work, have built up a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, that it's a great shame then not to encourage further development. I do think that often women look ahead and there's a point of cultural sort of concern they might have as whether they actually want to be on the boards. And that's why I think having a more than a token representation is so important. Otherwise you get to the board or you look ahead and see the board and don't particularly want to get on it necessarily. So the idea is to have more women on it, and then it just becomes a group of people who are making decisions about a business rather than a sort of all-male party that people are joining.
And one of the statistics you've quoted is that boards with 3 women, I think, have an 80% higher return on equity than those with no women. Is it possible to prove that cause and effect, or is it just coincidence?
Well, of course, you can never quite prove the order of cause and effect. And just to be perfectly honest, there aren't a huge number of companies that have more than 3 women or 3 or more women on the board. So the sample size is relatively small. But I think intuitively, the idea of having more perspectives, more types of people, not just a better gender balance, but international experience, people with different social and educational backgrounds, to inform and make better, more robust decisions just makes business sense.
Is this something that you think the investment community is signed up for? Because clearly they should be driving, to some extent, board composition and whether it's the right mix of people or not.
Well, I hope that will become one of the further drivers for change. It's certainly the composition of a board, the confidence that an investor has obviously in the management, including the board of a company, is a very big part of the decision to invest. I think it needs to be a bit more overt. Hopefully the guidance around the revised governance code that the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, I believe is working on now, will include some guidance for investors for when they're assessing the diversity of a board. But in the meantime, I think it's incumbent on all of us as investors to be looking at the depth, the strength and the variety of members of a board of the companies we invest in.
And finally, presumably some of this is up to women as well. Now, what are we doing wrong? Why are we not getting ourselves into these positions?
Well, of course, it's always impossible to generalise completely, but I do think that there's a tendency for us women not to necessarily push ourselves forward, not to be quite as sort of working the political side of things. I think if women do want to make a difference in terms of shaping a company's agenda to be considered for a board appointment, then we need to get out there a bit more, shout a bit more loudly.
Thanks very much indeed, Helena.